Start off with a bang. I'm sure that you've already seen the news, but it was just announced that Angel Reese has been traded from the Chicago Sky to the Atlanta Dream. Now, this is actually something that didn't surprise me. I actually didn't expect to see Angel Reese in a Chicago Sky jersey this season, especially with how her season ended last year with the Chicago Sky. There was clearly some friction between her and the franchise, and it seems like Angel Reese is very happy to be going to Atlanta. But the thing that did surprise me about this trade is the details of
2 first-round picks. That's what the Chicago Sky got for Angel Reese. Not 3, not 4, just 2 future first-rounders from a team that made the playoffs last season. And if you're wondering whether that's a good deal, the answer is already written on everyone's face. This wasn't a trade, this was a fire sale. And the question isn't whether Chicago lost this deal. The question is why they were so desperate to move her that they accepted what might be the worst trade package for a star player in recent WNBA history.
So let me break it down for you guys. So Atlanta will receive, of course, Angel Reese and the right to swap a second-round pick with the Chicago Sky in 2028. Now, the Chicago Sky received the Dream's 2027 first-round pick and the Dream's 2028 first-round pick. That's it, you guys. 2 first-round picks for Angel Reese. That is it. And if we look at the Atlanta Dream from last season, they were a really solid team. So adding Angel Reese to the mix with this Atlanta Dream team, if they're able to keep the roster at all similar to what they had last year, especially with players like Alicia Gray, like Ryan Howard, who knows if Bree Jones will stay, Jordan Canada was on that roster. Like if they're able to keep some of those key players, this Atlanta Dream team is definitely good.
Let's break down what Atlanta actually gave up here. The Dream's 2027 first-round pick and their 2028 first-round pick. Now here's the problem with that valuation. Last season, Atlanta finished with a winning record and made the playoffs. They had Alicia Gray, who's an all-star caliber player. They had Ryan Howard, their franchise cornerstone. They had Jordan Canada running the point. This is not a lottery team. Those first-round picks Atlanta is sending to Chicago, they're projected to be in the 8 to 12 range. Maybe worse if Atlanta stays competitive. Compare that to what Golden State gave up for their expansion draft picks. Compare it to what teams typically surrender for all-star level talent. Angel Reese just averaged a double-double as a rookie. She set the WNBA single-season rebounding record. She made the all-star team, and Chicago traded her for what amounts to 2 mid to late first-rounders from a playoff team. That's not asset management. That's capitulation.
Going to be a scary squad. And what is Chicago going to do now? Like, obviously, with this free agency period, it's going to be crazy. There are going to be so many big name players who are on teams that they weren't on last year. Like, the entire league is going to look different. I've warned you guys about this. What is the Chicago Sky going to do? Like, do they have something else planned? Because this trade in itself, they lost this trade. And I would also like to know if there were any other teams that were interested in Angel Reese. Like, there was a lot of whispers about Dallas maybe acquiring Angel Reese and her playing alongside Paige Beckers. But I'm quite interested to see what the Chicago Sky will do now with their roster. Are they going to build around Camila Cardoso?
And here's where it gets even more interesting. Atlanta is not just getting Angel Reese. They're getting the right to swap second-round picks with Chicago in 2028. That might sound like a minor detail, but think about what that implies. Chicago is essentially betting that they'll be bad enough in 2028 that their second-round pick will be more valuable than Atlanta's. They're telegraphing their own rebuild timeline. They're admitting they expect to be at the bottom of the league while Atlanta competes at the top. Now let's talk about what Atlanta is actually building here. You add Angel Reese to a roster that already has Alicia Gray and Ryan Howard. That's 3 players who can all create their own shot, all defend multiple positions, all play with high motors. If Atlanta manages to retain even half of their core from last season, they're not just a playoff team anymore. They're a legitimate championship contender, and they got there by giving up picks that probably won't even be in the lottery.
Are they going to try to land a really big free agent during this free agency period? Or are they just going to continue to tank and rebuild over the next 5 years? Now, also on top of that, you guys, Chicago is hosting the All-Star game this season. And so obviously with it being in Indiana last year, it was kind of like Caitlin Clark's All-Star. And then this year was going to be like Angel Reese's All-Star in her city in Chicago. But now, like, we are just going to have to see what the Chicago Sky do, because this felt like a loss to me. This felt like they lost this trade, and I don't know what they're going to do with their team. Now, on the flip side, you guys, a lot of Indiana Fever fans were noticing that the Indiana Fever play the Atlanta Dream 4 times this season, and that's more than they play any other team. And this schedule wasn't.
So what does Chicago do now? Because this is where the trade gets really confusing. They still have Camila Cardoso, who was the 3rd overall pick in last year's draft. She's a legitimate 7-footer with skills, but here's the thing about Cardoso. She and Angel Reese were supposed to complement each other. You had the interior presence in Cardoso and the versatile, high-energy forward in Reese. That was supposed to be Chicago's foundation for the next decade. And now they've dismantled it after just 1 season together. Are they going to build around Cardoso as a solo centerpiece? Because if that's the plan, they better have a very specific vision for what kind of team they're constructing. Cardoso is not the type of player who can carry an offense by herself. She needs guards who can penetrate and create opportunities. She needs shooters to space the floor. She needs a system that maximizes her strengths while hiding her limitations. And right now, looking at Chicago's roster after this trade, it's not clear they have any of those pieces. The other option is that Chicago is planning to make a massive splash in free agency. Maybe they're clearing cap space. Maybe they've got commitments from players we don't know about yet. But if that's the case, why not wait until after free agency to trade Reese? Why not see what you can build around her first, and then make the decision? The timing of this move suggests panic, not strategy.
A lot of Indiana Fever fans were noticing that the Indiana Fever play the Atlanta Dream 4 times this season, and that's more than they play any other team. And this schedule was announced before it was known that Angel Reese would have been going to the Atlanta Dream. And as we saw in the first 2 years of both Caitlin Clark and Angel Reese's career, the WNBA set it up so that Angel Reese and Caitlin Clark were playing each other so many times throughout the season. Like, those were the biggest games that they continued to hype up. So many fans are saying, like, did Kathy know something? Did Kathy know that Angel would be going to the Atlanta Dream, and she made sure to set it up so that we still got that college rivalry with these 2 teams? But nonetheless, you guys, the Fever will be playing the Atlanta Dream 4 times this season. They've already.
And then there's the schedule situation that's raising eyebrows all over the league. Indiana plays Atlanta 4 times this season, more than they play any other team. And this schedule was released before anyone knew Angel Reese would be going to Atlanta. So now you've got Caitlin Clark versus Angel Reese 4 times in the regular season, just like the WNBA set it up for them in Chicago and Indiana their first 2 years. The college rivalry, the media narrative, the ratings bonanza, it's all still there, just in different jerseys. Did Commissioner Kathy Engelbert know something? Because the timing here is almost too perfect. The WNBA has built so much of its recent growth on the Clark versus Reese dynamic. Those games drew massive ratings. They generated endless social media content. They brought in casual fans who might not otherwise watch women's basketball. And now, conveniently, the schedule just happens to maximize those matchups even after Reese leaves Chicago. That's either incredible foresight or inside information.
Already announced that they will be moving at least one of those games to a bigger arena in the State Farm Arena, because as you guys know, the Atlanta Dreams Arena is my least favorite arena in the WNBA. I believe it only holds 3,500 people. It doesn't have good lighting. They got to do better. Maybe with Angel Reese being in Atlanta, they will try to get themselves a better home arena, or at some point.
Atlanta has already announced they're moving at least one of those Fever games to State Farm Arena, which holds about 17,000 people compared to their usual venue that barely fits 3,000 to 500. And that's the right move, because those games are going to sell out instantly. But it also highlights something important about Atlanta's current situation. Their home arena is embarrassingly small for a professional sports franchise. The lighting is terrible. The atmosphere feels more like a high school gym than a WNBA venue. And now they've got a legitimate star in Angel Reese, who's going to draw crowds. If Atlanta is serious about competing, they need to figure out their arena situation permanently. Playing occasional games at State Farm Arena is fine for marquee matchups, but you can't build a sustainable home court advantage when you're constantly switching venues. Fans need consistency, players need familiarity, and right now Atlanta's setup feels temporary, like they're still not sure if they belong in the big leagues.
So even if, news could break by the time I'm uploading this episode. So bear with me. I will do the best that I possibly can to fill you guys in on everything that's going on in free agency. And there's also going to be a lot of rumors and such as well. So I might not report on every single rumor that is happening, but one rumor that I did want to report on is the news in Seattle. So it was reported that Skylar Diggins and Nneka Ogwumike are highly likely to leave the Seattle Storm during free agency. And those are two major players. So even when we're looking at the Chicago Sky, like, is there a world where Skylar Diggins and or Nneka go to Chicago? Just be prepared for the unexpected. That's all I would say with this W free agency.
Let's talk about the broader free agency chaos that's about to unfold. Because the Angel Reese trade is just the opening salvo. We're entering a period where the entire WNBA landscape could be completely reshuffled. Restricted free agents, unrestricted free agents, core designations, qualifying offers, every team in the league is making decisions right now that will define their next 3 to 5 years. And the rumors are already flying. Skylar Diggins-Smith and Nneka Ogwumike are both highly likely to leave Seattle. Those are two all-star caliber players potentially hitting the market. Where do they go? Does Chicago try to sign one of them to make up for losing Reese? Does Dallas make a run at pairing one of them with Paige Buchers, assuming they draft her? Does New York try to reload after missing the playoffs? Every domino that falls creates opportunities and problems for multiple teams. The expansion teams are also complicating everything. Portland and Toronto both made their selections in the expansion draft, but those rosters are far from final. Half those players could be gone by the time the season starts. Restricted free agents might get offer sheets from other teams. Unrestricted free agents might decide they'd rather compete for a championship than build with an expansion franchise. The rosters we saw announced last week might look completely different by May.
Next week, and I will get to interview some of these draftees. So if you have any questions you would like me to ask, please let me know in the comments below. And lastly, I didn't get to talk about this, you guys, but I didn't really have much to report, honestly, about the WNBA expansion draft. So I did watch it. I wasn't expecting it to be 10 minutes long. It was so underwhelming. And that's one thing with the WNBA. Like, you just signed this brand new CBA. You have 2 new expansion teams coming into the league. Like, you would think that this would be such an exciting time. You would think that you would do something bigger as opposed to just calling out the first 2 picks in this draft and then literally putting the entire roster on the screen. Like, do you guys remember last year for the Golden State Valkyries expansion draft? They had celebrities making the picks. They had, it was just a whole thing. They had an event for it. They had a podium. They made it such a bigger thing than they did for these 2 expansion teams. And I do not blame the expansion teams. Like, I feel like they have been waiting around for this new CBA to be signed so they could start putting together their teams. But I didn't like it from a league standpoint, how they basically just spent 5 minutes and just showed us the rosters. But with that, I did want to share with you guys the rosters for the expansion teams. So the Portland.
Now let's address the elephant in the room. The WNBA expansion draft was a massive disappointment from a production standpoint. 10 minutes long, 2 picks announced live, then the rest just thrown up on a screen. No ceremony, no drama, no celebration of these new franchises joining the league. Compare that to what Golden State got last year. They had celebrities making picks. They had a podium and a stage. They had an actual event that felt important. Portland and Toronto got a conference call and a PowerPoint presentation. And this matters because the WNBA just signed a new collective bargaining agreement that's supposed to usher in a new era of growth and professionalism. You've got 2 expansion teams paying massive fees to join the league. You've got players whose entire careers are about to change based on these selections, and the league treats it like an afterthought. That's not just bad optics. That's disrespectful to the players, the teams, and the fans who are excited about this moment. Portland's roster actually looks pretty solid. Bridget Carlton is a legitimate 3-and-D wing who can contribute immediately. Carly Lloyd brings veteran leadership. Nika Moole, despite tearing her ACL again, represents the kind of player Portland wants to invest in long-term. And the front office made that clear when they were asked about drafting an injured player. They said they want to help build Nika back up, that they believe in her, that they want to make her whole again. That's the kind of organizational culture statement that matters. That's how you build trust with players around the league. Toronto's roster is more of a question mark. Julie Alamand was their first pick, and she's a solid point guard. But Marina Mabrey, Aaliyah Edwards, Lexi Hull, Maria Conde, and Christy Wallace? That's a lot of role players without a clear star. Toronto might need to be very active in free agency to find their franchise centerpiece, or they're betting that the WNBA draft next week gives them someone who can be that player immediately. Which brings us to the draft. because in 7 days, the entire league gets another chance to reshape their rosters. And this draft class is loaded with talent that's going to translate immediately to the professional level. Paige Bueckers is the obvious name everyone knows, but the depth in this draft goes way beyond just the top pick. UCLA just won the national championship, and they have 4, maybe 5 players who could go in the first round. Lauren Betts dominated that title game and showed she's ready for the next level right now. Kiki Rice can step into a backup point guard role immediately and contribute. Janiyah Barker is a knockdown three-point shooter who can guard multiple positions. Gabriela Saquez was everywhere in that championship game, diving for loose balls, making winning plays, showing the kind of motor that translates to any level. And here's what makes those UCLA players so valuable. They remind me of Sonia Citron from last year. Citron wasn't breaking records at Notre Dame. She wasn't the #1 option. But when she got to the WNBA with Indiana, the transition was seamless. She fit in immediately because she plays winning basketball. She understands spacing. She makes the right reads. She competes on every possession. That's exactly what these UCLA players bring. High basketball IQ, versatility, team-first mentality. Those are the players who end up having long professional careers, even if they're not all-stars. So where does Lauren Betts go in the draft? Does her championship performance push her into the top 3? Does Gabriela Saquez, who was projected as a second-rounder, suddenly find herself going in the first round because teams saw how she elevated her game in the biggest moments? The tournament absolutely affects draft stock, and teams are making their final evaluations right now based on what they saw over the last 3 weeks. CBS Sports just put out a new mock draft that has some interesting changes. They've got Awa Pham going #1 now instead of Paige Bueckers. Olivia Miles at 2 to Minnesota, Ozzie Fudd at 3 to Seattle, Lauren Betts at 4 to Washington. That's a significant shift from earlier projections, and it shows how fluid these evaluations are right up until draft night. Seattle taking Ozzie Fudd is particularly interesting because they're reportedly looking for guards after potentially losing Skylar Diggins-Smith and Nneka Ogwumike. If Seattle is rebuilding, Fudd makes sense as a long-term piece. But if they're trying to stay competitive, do they need someone more ready to contribute immediately? That's the calculation every team is making right now. Chicago has the 5th pick in this draft, and suddenly that pick matters a lot more after trading Angel Reese. Do they take the best player available? Do they reach for a specific position to fill the hole Reese left? Do they trade the pick for more future assets and commit fully to tanking? Because if Chicago is hosting the All-Star game this season, and they were planning to make it Angel Reese's moment in her city, what's the alternative now? Do they try to draft someone who can be marketable enough to justify the All-Star game being in Chicago, or do they just accept that this season is going to be rough and focus on 2026? Here's what makes this Angel Reese trade so significant beyond just the basketball implications. It reveals how Chicago views their own timeline and their own value proposition to players. The friction between Reese and the franchise at the end of last season was obvious. She didn't seem happy. The organization didn't seem committed to building around her. And instead of trying to repair that relationship, instead of showing her a plan for how they'd get better, Chicago just moved on. That sends a message to every other player in the league. If you're a free agent considering Chicago, you now know that they'll give up on you after one season if things don't go perfectly. If you're a player already on the roster, you know your security is fragile. And if you're a fan, you know your team isn't committed to winning right now. They're committed to collecting assets and hoping things work out eventually. Atlanta, on the other hand, just sent the opposite message. They saw an opportunity to add a 22-year-old all-star who averaged a double-double as a rookie, and they pounced. They gave up future picks that probably won't be high anyway, because they're building a team that's going to win now. They're showing their current players that management is serious about competing. They're telling free agents that Atlanta is a destination, not a stopover. The contrast between these two organizations couldn't be clearer. Chicago is hoping, Atlanta is building. And in 3 years, when those draft picks Chicago got actually convey, we're going to look back at this trade and probably wonder what Chicago was thinking. Because unless those picks somehow turn into players better than Angel Reese, which seems unlikely given where they'll be in the draft order, this trade is going to age terribly. So what happens next? Free agency officially opens for negotiations on April 8th, and players can start signing on April 11th. That's this week. By Friday, we could see half the league's rosters completely transformed. Skylar Diggins-Smith could be in Chicago. Nneka Ogwumike could be in Dallas. Breanna Stewart could... Actually, she's probably staying in New York, but you get the point. Everything is in flux. And then next week, the draft adds another layer of chaos. 12 new players entering the league, all trying to find their roles, all potentially pushing veterans out of rotation spots. The expansion teams will be making their picks. Chicago will be trying to salvage something from this season. Atlanta will be figuring out how to integrate Angel Reese with their existing core. It's going to be wild. Here's my final thought on all of this. The WNBA is at a crossroads right now. The league has more attention, more investment, more opportunity than ever before. The new CBA is supposed to bring financial stability. The expansion teams are supposed to grow the footprint. The media deals are supposed to increase visibility. Everything is pointing toward growth. But trades like this Angel Reese deal make you wonder if all the teams are actually ready for this moment. Chicago just traded a marketable star for future assets that might not pan out. They're hosting an all-star game without a star to build it around. They're entering free agency without a clear plan. That's not the behavior of a franchise ready to capitalize on the WNBA's growth. That's the behavior of a franchise that's still figuring out how to operate professionally. Atlanta, meanwhile, is showing what it looks like when an organization has a vision and executes it. They identified a need, found a trade partner willing to sell low, and pounced. Now they need to follow through by fixing their arena situation, retaining their core players, and building a championship culture. If they do that, this trade could be the move that launches them into legitimate contention. And if Chicago doesn't figure out their plan quickly, this trade could be the move that sets them back half a decade. So here's the question for you.